If you had to rank the top 10 most versatile aircraft, which names would make your list? Would the F-101 Voodoo deserve a spot? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The McDonnell F-101 Voodoo didn't exactly have a smooth start. In fact, the project was almost scrapped. But luckily, strategists saw its potential. As the political landscape shifted, so too did the F-101, adapting to the evolving situation. Initially envisioned as a long-range escort bomber, it evolved into a tactical fighter bomber, an Interceptor, and eventually shed its weapons to become a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft. When you delve into the Voodoo story, you might notice it wasn't a global superstar as widely recognized as many other aircraft, but it was far from an obscure machine. The F-101 holds a unique and respected place in aviation history, especially for its roles in Cold War air defense interception, high-speed reconnaissance, and as a significant part of Canadian Air Force history. For those who flew, maintained, or lived near its operational bases, the F-101 Voodoo left a powerful and lasting impression. This is the story of the F-101 Voodoo. The genesis of the F-101 Voodoo, the dream of a sky guardian. The end of World War II marked the decline of traditional European powers like Britain, France, and Germany. It heralded the ascent of the United States and the Soviet Union as two global superpowers, both immensely wealthy and formidable. These two nations swiftly came to dominate the entire international political system. However, the ideological clash between capitalism and communism rapidly strained relations between these two titans. This dashed any hopes for a harmonious post-war era, pushing such a prospect far into the distance. A succession of proxy wars and regional tensions flared up. While these didn't lead to a large-scale, direct military confrontation between the superpowers, they ushered in a volatile historical period. Surely, none of us has forgotten it, the Cold War. The Cold War also marked the zenith of the nuclear age and the doctrine of deterrence. America's use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had irrevocably altered the landscape of warfare and military strategic thinking. Nuclear weapons became the ultimate deterrent, and the capability to launch a nuclear strike against an adversary's homeland was the linchpin in maintaining the so-called balance of terror. Not to be outdone, the Soviet Union urgently pursued the research and development of its nuclear arsenal. Their successful atomic bomb test in 1949 officially ignited the costly and perilous nuclear arms race. In the early years of the Cold War, before intercontinental ballistic missiles became widespread and reliable, long-range strategic bombers, like America's B-29, B-50, and B-36, or the Soviet Tu-4, were the primary delivery vehicles for nuclear weapons to enemy territory. Consequently, the survival and mission success of these bomber fleets were of paramount importance to the deterrent strategies of both sides. Recognizing this acutely, as early as August 1945, the United States Army Air Forces identified a pressing need. They required a penetration fighter, and or more specifically, a long-range escort fighter for their strategic bombers. So, why did the penetration fighter become so crucial? The answer lies in the hard-won lessons of World War II. During that global conflict, bomber formations operating without long-range fighter escorts, especially during the initial phase of Allied air raids on Nazi Germany, suffered devastating losses at the hands of enemy interceptors. Only with the arrival of long-range escorts like the P-51 Mustang did the situation dramatically improve, allowing strategic bombing campaigns to achieve maximum effectiveness. And in the tense atmosphere of the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union understood that if a conflict erupted, their bomber fleets would face a formidable force of interceptors, equipped with increasingly advanced radar and technology, particularly with the advent of jet aircraft. Soviet airspace was vast and heavily defended. For American bombers to penetrate deep inside and strike strategic targets, they needed effective protection from Soviet MiG fighters. Nuclear deterrence was premised on the belief that an adversary would not dare launch a first strike if they were certain of suffering a devastating retaliatory blow. If nuclear-armed bombers could be easily shot down before reaching their targets, the credibility of deterrence would be severely undermined. Therefore, escort fighters, by increasing the survivability of the bombers, played a pivotal role in ensuring the deterrent message was conveyed powerfully and reliably. It was from these vital strategic requirements that the United States Air Force pursued an ambitious yet straightforward idea to build a new type of fighter, an aircraft capable of flying deep into enemy territory, sweeping the skies clear of interceptors, thereby protecting America's long-range strategic flying fortresses like the massive B-36 Peacemaker and, later, the B-52 Stratofortress. This was the initial mission envisioned for the F-101 Voodoo. The McDonnell Aircraft Corporation, which had already established its reputation with naval fighters like the F-H Phantom and F-2H Banshee, answered the United States Army Air Force's call in the penetration fighter competition. Their proposal, initially designated Model 36 and later XF-88 Voodoo, was a twin-engine, swept-wing design focused on sheer performance. Speed and range were paramount. It was a sleek machine with innovatively placed engines in the lower fuselage and wing root intakes, powered by two Westinghouse XJ-34WE-13 turbojets, each providing around 3,000 pounds of thrust. The first XF-88 prototype took to the skies on October 20, 1948. However, the initial results were somewhat underwhelming. The XF-88 handled well and had decent range, but its top speed of 641 miles per hour at sea level wasn't truly groundbreaking. Undeterred, McDonnell engineers returned to the drawing board and equipped the second prototype, the XF-88A, with company-designed afterburners. This time, it was a different story. Thrust jumped to 3,600 pounds per engine, and performance improved significantly, albeit at the cost of prodigious fuel consumption. With these enhancements, the XF-88 won a 1950 fly-off competition against rivals from Lockheed with the XF-90 and North American with the YF-93. Success seemed assured, but political shifts and changing priorities intervened. Budget cuts under the Truman administration, coupled with the shock of the Soviet Union's first atomic bomb test in 1949, led the Air Force to reassess its needs. The penetration fighter program, including the XF-88, was unceremoniously canceled in 1950. It seemed the Voodoo was dead before it truly had a chance to live. But then, the wheels of history turned once more. The Korean War erupted in June 1950. The fierce aerial combat over MiG Alley served as a brutal reminder to the United States Air Force that even their best bombers were vulnerable. The need for a capable escort fighter became urgent once again. In early 1951, the requirement for a long-range escort fighter was revived, and McDonnell, with its XF-88 design gathering dust, was ready to seize the opportunity. They didn't just resurrect it, they elevated it to a new level. This new aircraft, still bearing the Voodoo name but designated F-101, was an entirely different beast. It was significantly larger, about 13 feet longer, and twice as heavy as the XF-88. It carried 3 times the fuel and, crucially, was designed around the revolutionary Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojet engines, the same powerful engines that would equip the B-52 and KC-135. To harness the power of the new engines and improve high-speed stability, engineers gave it a distinctive T-tail, placing the horizontal stabilizer atop the vertical fin. The first F-101A Voodoo, a truly massive fighter, made its maiden flight on September 29, 1954, and as hoped, it effortlessly broke the sound barrier on that historic flight. From this promising foundation, the F-101 Voodoo would continually transform, donning different hats to meet the diverse requirements of the United States Air Force, creating a family of aircraft with specialized roles. The aerial shapeshifter, a different form for every mission. The McDonnell F-101 Voodoo evolved into several specialized variants throughout its production run, each tailored for distinct operational roles. By the time production ceased in March 1961, nearly 800 Voodoos had been built, with each version contributing to the aircraft's versatile legacy in United States military aviation. F-101A and F-101C, the tactical nuclear strikers. The F-101A, which entered service in May 1957, marked the first production version of the Voodoo family. This fighter-bomber variant featured four 20mm M39 rotary cannons and a centerline pylon for carrying nuclear weapons. Equipped with the low-altitude bombing system, the F-101A could deliver nuclear ordnance using special maneuvers designed to allow the pilot to survive the blast. Starting in 1958, 3 squadrons operated from Royal Air Force bases in the United Kingdom, placing targets deep within the Soviet Union within their 2,000-mile operational radius. The F-101C, introduced in September 1957, addressed a critical shortcoming of the A model. While the F-101A airframe could only withstand 6 33G maneuvers instead of the intended 7 33. The C model featured a reinforced structure, adding 500 pounds, to allow for the full 7 33G maneuvers as per specifications. Additionally, its revised fuel system increased the maximum flight time in afterburner. Only 47 F-101Cs were produced before production shifted to other variants. F-101B, the all-weather Interceptor. In response to delays in the Convair F-102 Delta Dagger program, the Air Force fielded an Interceptor variant of the Voodoo, the F-101B. This all-weather Interceptor made its first flight in March 1957. The airframe was significantly modified with a larger, more rounded forward fuselage to accommodate the Hughes MG-13 fire control radar. Unlike its single-seat predecessors, the F-101B utilized a tandem 2-seat cockpit, providing space for a pilot and a dedicated radar operator. The aircraft's armament was substantially upgraded. Engineers replaced the 4 cannons with 4 AEM-4 Falcon air-to-air missiles, housed on a rotating pallet in the fuselage weapons bay. Later production versions could simultaneously carry 2 nuclear-tipped MB-1 AIR-2 Genie rockets on one side of the pallet and infrared-guided Falcons on the other. Thanks to more powerful Pratt & Whitney J57P55 engines, the F-101B achieved a top speed of Mach 1, 85, making it the fastest Voodoo variant. With a total of 480 units produced, the F-101B was the most numerous version in the Voodoo line and served with the Air National Guard until September 1982. RF-101A and RF-101C, the supersonic eyes in the sky. The development of unarmed reconnaissance versions began in 1956, resulting in the world's first supersonic photo reconnaissance aircraft. These variants replaced the fighter's radar and cannons with up to 6 specialized cameras housed in a redesigned nose. 35 RF-101As entered service on May 6, 1957, with the 363rd Tactical Reconnaissance Wing at Shaw Air Force Base. Their successor, the RF-101C, featured the reinforced airframe of the F-101C and dedicated cooling scoops on the tail, permitting extended afterburner use. A total of 166 RF-101Cs were produced. These reconnaissance platforms gained fame during Operation Sunrun on November 27, 1957, setting 3 transcontinental speed records. More critically, RF-101s flew 82 low-level missions over Cuba during the 1962 missile crisis, providing decisive photographic evidence of Soviet missile activities. TF-101B and F-101F, the trainers. To train pilots for the complex 2-seat Interceptor, McDonnell produced dedicated training variants. Initially designated TF-101, these aircraft were later redesignated F-101F. Alongside 79 dedicated trainers, 152 existing F-101Bs were later retrofitted with dual controls. The training versions maintain full operational capability while providing instructor pilots the ability to monitor and guide trainees through the intricacies of supersonic flight and weapons employment. 10 CF-101F trainers were supplied to the Royal Canadian Air Force, contributing to North American air defense throughout the Cold War. Although these variants demonstrated the incredible flexibility of the Voodoo design, its actual journey in combat roles was filled with unexpected twists and turns, beginning with the very mission it was supposedly born to perform. From bomber escort to nuclear strike platform. Soon after its inception, strategic priorities rapidly shifted for the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo, transforming this potent aircraft from an escort for America's nuclear bombers into a frontline nuclear delivery platform. This shift illustrated the swift adaptation of military doctrine during the most intense phases of the Cold War confrontation. Initially, the F-101 was conceived as a long-range escort fighter for Strategic Air Command's bomber fleet. However, the advent of high-speed, long-range jet bombers like the B-52 Stratofortress rendered the need for escorts largely obsolete. As a result, Strategic Air Command completely canceled its requirements for this type of aircraft. Instead of abandoning this promising design, the United States Air Force sought to repurpose the F-101. Tactical Air Command recognized the aircraft's potential and decided to reconfigure it as a fighter bomber. Consequently, all 77 F-101As produced were transferred to TAC's 81st Tactical Fighter Wing, ushering in a new operational chapter for the aircraft. TAC mandated several changes to prepare the F-101 for its new nuclear strike role. These included adding equipment for air-to-ground communication, provisions for carrying external stores like fuel tanks or weapons, structural strengthening to withstand combat maneuvers. The F-101A and F-101C were modified to carry a single nuclear weapon, typically the Mk-7 Thor nuclear bomb, but they were also compatible with the Mk-28, Mk-43, and Mk-57. This endowed TAC with a long-range, supersonic nuclear delivery capability. Engineers equipped the aircraft with an MA-7 fire control radar for both air-to-air and air-to-ground operations, and critically, the low-altitude bombing system. The low-altitude bombing system, sometimes referred to as toss bombing, or, as pilots humorously dubbed it, the idiot loop for its over-the-shoulder delivery method, was an ingenious system. It allowed the Voodoo to release its nuclear weapon from low altitude, pull up sharply to toss the bomb towards the target, affording the aircraft precious seconds to turn and escape the blast zone. Pilots trained for these perilous missions, dashing in at low altitude, deep into Soviet or Eastern European territory, primarily targeting enemy airfields. Though not officially considered one-way missions, the chances of surviving after delivering a nuclear weapon were slim, a grim reality understood by all. However, this tactical strike role for the Voodoo was also short-lived. Aircraft like the F-100 Super Sabre and especially the Republic F-105 Thunder Chief, a massive, powerful jet nicknamed the Thud, proved more rugged and better suited for the harsh air-to-ground combat environment. Though its tactical nuclear strike role didn't last, the Voodoo's core attributes, speed, range, and all-weather capability, ultimately steered it towards the mission that would largely define its service career, becoming a frontline sentinel, safeguarding North American skies. Guardian of the Northern Skies.
Hello, I'm Colonel Milt Askins of the Air Defense Command, United States Air Force. As I'm sure you know, the mission of the Air Defense Command is to protect this continent from any hostile air attack that might be launched against us. And as I'm sure you also know, the units of the Air Defense Command, which are located here in your community, are a very important part of this operation. In a very real sense, they represent your personal protection against any such enemy air invasion. My purpose in visiting with you today is to tell you a little more about how we in the Air Defense Command conduct our mission. Particularly, I would like to familiarize you with our newest weapon system, the McDonnell F-101 Interceptor, which is now entering squadron duty here. In a few moments, I would like to discuss our mission with you. However, first, may I present to you the story of the outstanding McDonnell F-101 Voodoo.
And so, the Voodoo finally found its true calling. As the Cold War intensified, the gravest concern for North American defense was a large-scale Soviet bomber attack flying over the Arctic. Air Defense Command, later Aerospace Defense Command, was in desperate need of a new interceptor. They needed a fighter that could scramble in minutes, fly long distances at high speed, reach extreme altitudes, carry powerful radar to detect enemy aircraft in any weather, day or night, and neutralize them before they could reach their targets in the U.S. or Canada. Enter the F-101B. First flown on March 27, 1957, it officially entered service with the 60th Fighter Interceptor Squadron on January 5, 1959. This version differed significantly from the A and C variants, being purpose-built for the interceptor mission. Two-seat cockpit. The F-101B featured a tandem cockpit. The pilot sat up front, while behind was the radar intercept officer, later known as the weapons systems officer. The RIO was responsible for operating the powerful Hughes MG-13 fire control system. According to one former F-101B radar intercept officer, the back seat also offered some navigational assistance, though the radar was generally effective enough over familiar terrain. Missile armament. The F-101B dispensed with cannons. Its internal weapons bay, originally designed for bombs or auxiliary fuel, was modified into a special rotating rack. This rack typically carried 4 Hughes AIM, 4 Falcon air-to-air missiles, often a mix of 2 infrared homing and 2 semi-active radar-guided versions. After launching the first pair, the bay door would rotate to expose the next. Genie, the nuclear punch. This was the F-101B's ace in the hole. At later production models, under the Kitty Car upgrade program, could replace 2 Falcons with 2 unguided AIR-2A Genie nuclear rockets. Each Genie carried a 1.5 kiloton nuclear warhead. This missile wasn't designed for precision strikes. Its purpose was to detonate amidst a formation of Soviet bombers, with its blast wave and radiation capable of destroying multiple targets with a single blow. The Genie's only live fire test, from an F-89J Scorpion in 1957, demonstrated its terrifying destructive power. More powerful engines. The F-101B was equipped with improved Pratt Whitney J57 P55 engines, each generating up to 16,900 pounds of thrust with afterburner. They were easily recognizable by their significantly longer afterburner nozzles compared to the A and C versions. Infrared search and track system. During an interceptor upgrade program called Project Bold Journey from 1963 to 1966, most F-101Bs were integrated with an infrared search and track system. This system was housed in a small fairing just ahead of the pilot's windscreen, replacing the little-used refueling probe. This enhancement not only improved target detection capabilities, but also increased effectiveness against electronic countermeasures. Hundreds of F-101Bs became the backbone of Air Defense Command and later North American Aerospace Defense Command interceptor squadrons, stretching from Alaska to Florida. For nearly 2 decades, they remained on quick reaction alert, with pilots and crews living in specialized facilities near their aircraft, ready to scramble at a moment's notice. Veterans have shared stories of the intense pressure of quick reaction alert duty. The sudden, piercing shriek of the alert siren, the frantic dash to the aircraft, near vertical takeoffs. Many pilots deliberately flew steeply over populated areas to avoid breaking windows with low-altitude sonic booms, followed by long, lonely, tense hours in the cold, empty skies of the North. And this picture of Cold War air defense would be incomplete without acknowledging the crucial contribution of a close ally, who also placed their faith in the Voodoo's might. Canada and the Voodoo heading north. The Voodoo's mission didn't stop at the United States border. In the early 1960s, Canada was seeking a modern supersonic interceptor to replace its aging subsonic Avro CF-100 Canucks, aiming to fulfill its crucial commitments to North American Aerospace Defense Command. This search became particularly urgent after the cancellation of the advanced, indigenous Avro CF-105 Aero program in 1959, a sore point in Canadian aviation history to this day. And then, the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo emerged as an excellent solution. Between July 1961 and May 1962, Canada acquired 66 F-101Bs and the 2-seat F-101F trainer version directly from the United States Air Force production line, designating them as the CF-101 Voodoo. For Royal Canadian Air Force pilots, the CF-101 marked a turning point, offering their first taste of supersonic flight. And they absolutely loved it. One observer cheerfully recalled in 1961 that, initially, some pilots enjoyed tormenting civilians with sonic booms, and sometimes breaking rules like going supersonic right after takeoff from CFB Comox in British Columbia over the Strait of Georgia. The Voodoo's distinctive roar became an emblem of Canadian air defense for a generation. Canada's Voodoos served with distinction for a very long time. From the early 1960s to the mid-1980s, the final flight took place in April 1987. They operated from strategic bases such as Comox, Bagotville, Quebec, Chatham, New Brunswick, and Cold Lake, Alberta, standing quick reaction alert alongside their United States Air Force counterparts. Notably, the CF-101 Voodoos were armed with MB-1, AIIR-2, Genie nuclear-tipped rockets, weapons owned and controlled by the United States but deployed on Canadian aircraft. This politically controversial arrangement contributed to the fall of Prime Minister John Diefenbaker's government in 1963. Nevertheless, the Genie missile remained a key component of the CF-101's arsenal until 1984. Life with the CF-101 Voodoo in Canada had its own unique flavor. Technicians, affectionately dubbed Voodoo medics by the pilots, worked tirelessly to keep these complex and aging jets operational. Sometimes, they employed typically Canadian ingenuity, like using car paint from Canadian tire stores to mark squadrons for routine maintenance. Units like the 416 Lynx Squadron, initially based in Chatham, later moved to Cold Lake, excelled, winning top honors in NORAD air defense competitions, a testament to the superior skill of Canadian air crews and the enduring effectiveness of the CF-101 despite its years of service. There were occasional dramatic incidents, such as a fire during a takeoff roll in a firefighting drill. The Voodoo's magnesium alloy airframe ignited incredibly quickly, horrifying the entire squadron watching. Under Operation Peace Wings, Between 1970 and 1971, Canada replaced its remaining older CF-101s with 56 refurbished F-101Bs and 10 new F-101F trainers from the United States. All these aircraft were upgraded under the Project Bold Journey program, equipping them with infrared search and track systems. Although later assessments sometimes suggested the aircraft was acquired under United States pressure, or that its design was overly complex or had served too long, the CF-101 nevertheless proved to be a reliable and effective asset for the Royal Canadian Air Force during the turbulent decades of the Cold War. Canadian Voodoo pilots frequently scrambled to intercept unidentified radar blips encroaching on North American airspace. Most turned out to be civilian aircraft off course, but occasionally, 416 and 425 squadrons would encounter Soviet Tu-95 Bear bombers prowling along the Atlantic coast en route to Cuba. During these intercepts, the lead Voodoo would fly close to identify the target, while the wingman maintained a standoff distance, ready to launch AIM-4 missiles if the situation escalated. When approaching at night, the CF-101 would switch on its fuselage-mounted searchlight on the left side to illuminate the target, a maneuver that sometimes prompted the Tu-95 crews to shine their own landing lights directly back into the Voodoo cockpit. According to official figures, units based in Alaska alone successfully conducted 306 intercepts out of 473 Soviet aircraft incursions between 1961 and 1991. The majority of the remaining intercepts, around 3,000 throughout the Cold War period from 1962 to 1991, occurred around Iceland. The image of CF-101s thundering overhead or performing low-level aerobatics at air shows remains an indelible memory for many Canadians. When the CF-101 was retired and replaced by the CF-18 Hornet, it marked the end of a significant era in the country's Air Force history. However, the F-101 story didn't end with its interceptor role. When it shed its weapons, it transformed into a high-speed spy, Geats conducting daring reconnaissance missions that brought back invaluable intelligence during pivotal historical moments. Eyes in the Sky, the Voodoo's daring reconnaissance missions. Although the Voodoo's interceptor role was its most prominent and enduring, its most significant combat contributions came from its unarmed reconnaissance variants, the RF-101. In aerial reconnaissance, especially when flying over heavily defended enemy airspace, speed is life. The Voodoo's exceptional performance made it an ideal platform for gathering critical photo intelligence. The RF-101A and RF-101C models shed the cannons and radar of their fighter counterparts. Instead, they featured a longer, redesigned nose housing, multiple cameras, typically forward oblique, vertical, and side oblique setups. They retained the incredible speed and power of the armed Voodoos, but relied entirely on that performance, surprise, and pilot skill for survival. The Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962. This was perhaps the RF-101's finest and most tense hour. As the world teetered on the brink of nuclear war, F-101s from the 363rd Tactical Reconnaissance Wing played an utterly vital and incredibly dangerous role. While high-flying U-2 spy planes provided a strategic overview, it was the RF-101s that conducted daring, high-speed, low-level flights across Cuba. Starting on October 23, 1962, these pilots flew down in the weeds to capture detailed, time-sensitive imagery of Soviet missile sites under construction and Il-28 Beagle bombers being assembled. These missions were not without their hitches. Initially, the RF-101's large 9 by 9-inch Ka-2 cameras produced blurry images at high speed and low altitude. To overcome this, engineers quickly devised solutions. They jury-rigged older World War II-era Ka-18A cameras, which could synchronize film speed with the aircraft's ground speed. Simultaneously, They borrowed 24 smaller Ka-45 cameras from the Navy, resulting in much sharper and more stable photographs. Pilots also used AN/AHN-2 voice recorders to document observations and detect enemy radar signals. For their bravery, 15 pilots were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. President John Kennedy personally awarded the 363rd Wing the Presidential Unit Citation, stating, "The work of these two units has contributed as much to the security of the United States as any units in our history and any group of men in our history."
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom here in this hemisphere, and we hope around the world. God willing, that goal will be achieved. Thank you and good night.
Southeast Asia, the RF-101C, was one of the first United States Air Force jets deployed to Southeast Asia, beginning reconnaissance flights over Laos and South Vietnam in 1961. As this theater escalated, they became the primary tactical reconnaissance aircraft from around 1961 to 1970. Before the RF-4C Phantom II became widely available, they were the eyes for countless strike missions by fighters like the F-100 and F-105. Missions included pre-strike reconnaissance, flying over targets before an attack to identify enemy defenses, confirm target locations, and aid in planning. They even led the first bombing missions into North Vietnam in February 1965. Bomb damage assessment, returning after a strike, often through anti-aircraft fire, to photograph and assess mission effectiveness. Route and area surveillance, mapping roads, rivers, suspected enemy troop concentrations, and vital supply lines like the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Flying missions over North Vietnam and Laos was exceptionally dangerous. REF 101 pilots often had to fly on the deck at 500 to 600 knots to evade radar and minimize exposure time to anti-aircraft artillery and, later, surface-to-air missiles. Although their initial speed advantage made the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo reconnaissance aircraft nearly immune to enemy MiG fighters, losses were still significant. Between 1965 and 1970, the United States Air Force lost approximately 39 RF-101s in Southeast Asia, 33 of which were shot down in combat, primarily by low-level anti-aircraft artillery, 5 by surface-to-air missiles, 1 destroyed in an airfield attack, and 1 shot down in an air-to-air engagement with a Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-21 in September 1967. 6 other RF-101s were lost due to technical malfunctions and operational accidents. This was a steep price paid for the invaluable intelligence these reconnaissance missions provided. Some veterans who served in the conflict even reported that when the McDonnell RF-4C Phantom II reconnaissance aircraft entered service, the older RF-101 Voodoos often demonstrated greater reliability and were frequently tasked to fly missions as replacements when Phantoms experienced technical issues. To improve night photography, some F-101Cs were modified under Project Toy Tiger in 1964 with a new camera package and photo flash flare dispensers. The Mod 1181 upgrade added automatic camera controls. In April 1967, ALQ-71 electronic countermeasures pods were added to combat surface-to-air missiles. However, the increased drag reduced speed, making them more vulnerable to MiGs, necessitating fighter escorts. By late 1967, the more modern RF-4C Phantom II began to take over, and the last RF-101s were withdrawn from the combat zone in 1970. Taiwanese operations, The RF-101 also participated in covert operations with the Republic of China Air Force in Taiwan, starting in November 1959. Under Operation Boomtown, Taiwan received 8 RF-101As, flown by the Republic of China, Air Force's best pilots. These Voodoos conducted numerous clandestine high-speed, low-level reconnaissance missions over mainland China, often practicing air-to-air refueling with United States KB-50 tankers to extend their range. These missions provided valuable intelligence, such as the detection of 5 new MiG airfields along the Chinese coast in June 1961. The program was highly perilous. 4 RF-101s were lost over the mainland, and the United States quietly supplied replacements. These risky flights continued until around 1970. Behind these dangerous missions and diverse roles were courageous individuals, the pilots who directly faced the challenges and glories with the Voodoo. Their stories offer a more authentic and vivid perspective. Stories from the cockpit. Personal accounts from F-101 Voodoo veterans reveal the extraordinary challenges these pilots faced in both combat and peacetime operations. These first-hand narratives not only highlight the aircraft's capabilities, but also the sheer courage of those who flew it through the most demanding situations. On March 10, 1967, Lieutenant Colonel James Brixell volunteered for one of the most audacious reconnaissance missions of the Vietnam War, tasked with photographing the Thai Nguyen steel plant located 30 miles north of Hanoi. Brixell knew he would be facing exceptionally heavy defenses. As his RF-101C approached the target, an 85mm anti-aircraft shell exploded directly beneath his aircraft. The blast crippled his left engine, severely damaged the left flap, caused a loss of hydraulic pressure, and immediately filled the cockpit with thick smoke. In this dire situation, Brixell made a bold decision to press on with the mission. In his own words, flying through that airspace was like flying down the throat of a gun, as he navigated one of the heaviest concentrations of anti-aircraft fire ever directed at a single aircraft. Despite battling severely damaged controls, Brixell held his course, completed his photo run over the target, and somehow nursed his wounded Voodoo back to base at U Dorn, Thailand, on a single engine. For this act of extraordinary heroism, Brixell was awarded the Air Force Cross, the United States' second highest decoration for valor. Colonel Robin Olds, commanding the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing at Royal Air Force Bentwaters in 1964, took a calculated risk that ultimately changed the course of his career. Eager to demonstrate his pilot's capabilities and secretly hoping to escape a pending promotion to general, Olds formed an unauthorized F-101 aerial demonstration team. Together with pilots Morgan, Tom Hirsch, and Ski Fantasky, Olds created a Thunderbird-style show that culminated in their signature bomb burst maneuver. At a Royal Air Force Mildenhall open house, the team performed what Olds later described as a nice, safe formation barrel roll over the runway, followed by their full aerobatic routine at Bentwaters. The stunt achieved exactly what Olds intended. His superior demanded a court-martial, while United States Air Forces in Europe, Air Forces Africa Commander General Gabriel de Sosway delivered an epic reaming. Olds' Legion of Merit citation was torn up. He received a negative performance review, and most importantly, he was removed from the Brigadier General promotion list. Even training missions carried significant risks. During the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, F-101B pilot Jonathan Meyer recalled, "I remember our 13th FIS air crews listening tensely to President Kennedy's October 22nd speech as some of us prepared to deploy from Glasgow AFB, Montana, to the municipal airport at Billings. These pilots flew with live nuclear weapons, both AIR-2A, Genie rockets, and infrared homing AIM-4C Falcon missiles. ready for potential conflict. We flew there fully loaded, in pairs and with our AIR-2A nukes and IR missiles ready for war, Meyer explained. The improvised deployment proved challenging, with a few cut tires on Billings's unprepared runway. In Europe, the situation was equally tense. Bon Hansen, an 81st TFW F-101C pilot, described, "I was on alert the day the Cuban Missile Crisis balloon went up. We went to red cockpit alert until nightfall. For the next week or more, the whole wing was loaded and ready to launch. It was serious." Challenges from the cockpit, the flying barrel, Voodoo and its treacherous flight characteristics. Behind its sleek appearance and impressive speed records, piloting the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo was a true challenge, demanding respect, precision, and consummate skill from its aviators. Many considered it one of the most demanding military aircraft ever fielded, an unforgiving machine with inherently dangerous flight characteristics. The F-101's most notorious and perilous issue was its tendency to pitch up. This aerodynamic flaw occurred when the aircraft reached its critical angle of attack, causing the nose to abruptly and violently pitch upwards, often leading to a complete loss of control and potentially an unrecoverable flat spin, oscillating between 20 and 70 degrees nose up. This deadly characteristic stemmed primarily from the combination of its swept-wing design and distinctive T-tail configuration. At high angles of attack, turbulent airflow from the wings would impinge on the top of the T-tail, both pushing the nose up and reducing the effectiveness of the horizontal stabilizer. Pitch-up wasn't just a dry technical term. It was a nightmare lurking for every Voodoo pilot. This lethal aerodynamic trap became the tomb for more than a few brave pilots, even during initial testing. Imagine a momentary lapse in concentration, and the aircraft would suddenly rear its head skyward uncontrollably, defying all pilot input. And if this fury struck below 15,000 feet, an altitude that might seem to offer a chance, the ironclad, no exceptions order was eject, because to hesitate meant facing an inescapable death spiral. Beyond pitch up, the Voodoo's sheer power was also an element to be tamed. Its remarkable performance came from its pair of potent Pratt Whitney J57 turbojet engines, J57 P13s on the F-101A, and J57 P55s delivering 16,900 pounds of thrust each with afterburner on the F-101B. Unlike modern aircraft, with gradual afterburner engagement, the F-101 possessed what was known as hard burner lights, essentially controlled explosions of fuel simultaneously injected into the afterburner chambers. This jolt of energy contributed to the Voodoo's exceptional climb rate and acceleration, allowing it to go from a standing start to 40,000 feet in about 2 minutes and reach a top speed of Mach 1.85. Several other factors contributed to the F-101's demanding nature. Its critical angle of attack was very close to normal operating parameters, requiring extreme pilot vigilance. Compressor stalls could lead to a loss of thrust or even fire. Handling characteristics during takeoff and landing also demanded intense concentration, and the main landing gear tires typically only lasted 9 to 10 landings due to severe abrasion. Furthermore, although the F-101A variant was designed to withstand 7.33, the actual airframe was reportedly only stressed for 6.33. It was because of these characteristics that the F-101 Voodoo also earned the unflattering nickname, the Flying Barrel. This moniker reflected not only its handling challenges, but also its physical appearance. With its long fuselage, the F-101B variant stretched to 67 feet 5 inches, longer than a DC-3 transport. Combined with relatively short, mid-fuselage low-mounted swept wings, the Voodoo evoked the image of a barrel in flight. Ironically, attempts to improve aerodynamics, like the high T-tail configuration intended for efficiency and weight reduction, ultimately contributed to its pitch-up problems. To counter these challenges, the United States Air Force implemented specialized training programs, including detailed films demonstrating recovery techniques. Engineers also installed a device called a stick knocker, a control stick travel limiter, to prevent pilots from pulling the stick past certain limits at specific speeds. However, as Brigadier General Robin Olds reported, even with these measures, an F-101A could still abruptly and without warning enter a pitch-up. While these fixes somewhat improved safety, they never entirely eliminated the Voodoo's inherent aerodynamic issues. Pilot experiences best testify to the Voodoo's temperamental nature. Colonel Robert Oz Osborne described it as a lady, a wonderful airplane, but very sensitive, very sensitive. It had to be flown correctly. Test pilot Richard Baird concurred, "This was the most by-the-book fighter I ever flew. The Voodoo would bite you. You really had to fly it by the book." And Colonel Jonathan Gardner, a reconnaissance pilot, bluntly admitted that on your first flight, you didn't fly it. You hung on to it. These accounts explain why the F-101 Voodoo always held a special, challenging, yet deeply memorable place in the minds of those who had the opportunity to conquer it. The end of an era and the Voodoo's legacy. After years of faithful service, the McDonnell F-101 Voodoo gradually disappeared from active duty rosters throughout the 1970s and early 1980s. This powerful interceptor, once the backbone of North American air defense, made way for newer aircraft that incorporated advanced technologies developed during the Vietnam War era. In the United States, the Air Force National Guard continued flying the F-101B Interceptor until 1982, well after active duty squadrons had transitioned to the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II. The Phantom offered significantly improved avionics, greater weapons capacity, and better all-around performance that better suited evolving mission requirements. For Canadian forces, the transition proved more complex. In 1971, Canada acquired 66 refurbished ex-United States Air Force F-101Bs under Operation Peace Wings to replace their aging first-generation CF-101s. These aircraft served until 1984, when the Royal Canadian Air Force finally retired the last operational Voodoos, replacing them with the McDonnell Douglas CF-18 Hornet. The final Canadian Voodoo flight occurred on December 31, 1984, marking the end of this aircraft's frontline service. Upon retirement, many F-101 Voodoos found permanent homes in aviation museums and military installations across North America. Presently, visitors can view preserved examples at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa, the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, the Castle Air Museum in Atwater, California. These carefully restored aircraft provide tangible connections to Cold War history, allowing new generations to appreciate the Voodoo's imposing presence and historical significance. The McDonnell F-101 Voodoo continues to captivate aviation enthusiasts for several compelling reasons. First, its distinctive silhouette, long, sleek fuselage, swept wings, and prominent vertical stabilizer, represents a quintessential Cold War fighter aesthetic. Furthermore, the Voodoo's record-breaking speed achievements remain impressive even by today's standards. Its December 1957 world speed record of 1,207.6 miles per hour demonstrates the engineering excellence that went into its design. Finally, the challenges of flying the Voodoo contribute significantly to its mystique. As pilots frequently note, mastering this demanding aircraft required exceptional skill, creating a special brotherhood among those who successfully tamed the 10 Wonder. The The McDonnell F-101 Voodoo truly stands as one of the most versatile military aircraft ever developed. From its unlikely origins as a canceled escort fighter to its record-breaking speed and diverse combat roles, the Voodoo carved out a unique niche in aviation history. Its dark magic moniker perfectly encapsulated both its capabilities and its temperament. Powerful yet unpredictable, deadly effective yet demanding absolute respect from those who flew it. Was it a perfect aircraft? Not. Its handling could be treacherous, earning its dark magic reputation for good reason. Its originally intended primary role as a bomber escort never truly materialized. However, when the Voodoo found its true purpose, it performed exceptionally. What are your memories of the Voodoo? Did you fly it, work on it, or simply marvel at it from below? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching this video. Your likes are a huge motivation for us to further improve our video quality. See you in the next video.